to be a kind of unofficial roadmap, and there's a bit of a story behind the unofficial part of that, so I shall elaborate on that in just a second. But first off, I'll do an introduction. And basically my role is partner solution architect, and I'm part of an EMEA-wide team that is basically there to help you guys as partners to understand the commerce product. So I work primarily with obviously our, bronze, silver, platinum level partners, and I'm part of a team that sits across EMEA. Each of us has a specialty in a different part of the Adobe suite. So I obviously work with commerce. I have another colleague who is unfortunately not on the call today, but a chap called Simon Coles, who has been working with us for a couple of weeks now, but he's been with Adobe for a long time. He's been working with commerce for a long time, so he's got lots of experience. So basically, we're a team that are here to help you as partners to answer any questions. We obviously work primarily with kind of official partners versus with open source partners. But I try my best to keep on top of my Twitter and answer questions unofficially as well. To be honest, I learn as much from conversations on Twitter as I sometimes do from conversations with official partners. So I'm very happy to sort of engage and to try and make myself useful. And my background is basically 20 years ago, I started off working in a small agency, just me and two other guys. We were creating mostly websites and some e-commerce solutions from scratch. We were using the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. We're quite often competing with bigger agencies that we're using. In those days, it was probably, ASP and Cold Fusion, I think, was a big thing when I first started working. So it was a few years ago. I'll try not to give my age away, but it was a few years ago. And I eventually ended up moving to a couple of other companies, ended up working for eBay, and then eventually ended up being part of the Magento organization about 5 or 6 years ago. So I've been around the Magento product and then the Adobe Commerce product for a few years, and very happy to still be involved with it because it's I think it's a great product. So basically, reach out to me if you've got questions, either on Twitter via my email address or by LinkedIn, and always happy to run these sessions again. Today, I'm going to do a bit of an unusual session. So when Burkan, our partner manager, said to me, there's going to be this Magento Stammtisch, would you like to present? Maybe you can talk about the roadmap. I said, yeah, as I always do. I like doing these sessions. They're always good fun. What I didn't realize at the time is that it's going to be a mix of official partners and unofficial partners. And actually, the roadmap we can't share with unofficial partners. You have to have signed an NDA. Oh, that's going to be a problem. We found that we worked this out yesterday, by the way, so this was a little bit last minute. So I thought, okay, I'm going to need to come up with something. And I realized that, probably one of the things that we all do is we find solutions, we create hacks, we reverse engineer things. So I thought, well, maybe I can reverse engineer the roadmap. Most of the roadmap it's out there anyway. Most of it is public. Most of it we've got actually, experience lead. We've got documentation that actually shows what we're doing. So I thought, well, this will be a nice experiment, really. Let's see if I can rebuild the roadmap using just publicly available information. And I think, sometimes people try to invent the roadmap based on what they think Adobe might be doing. So I thought, well, I'll see if I can actually do it based on things that we've said and keep it kind of in line with the actual roadmap. So that's basically what I've done. So this is going to be interesting because I've never presented this deck before. It is very similar to the official roadmap, and I'm going to talk about a lot of the things that we're doing with the commerce product and try to give you the real story of what we're doing with the product, basically. So I think it will be interesting. And I say I did manage to find basically public documentation that talks about a lot of the things that we're doing with the roadmap. So it's quite realistic. I'm sure in the chat as well, we'll have partners who have seen me present the official roadmap and will be able to tell you how realistic or not this is. I don't think we miss out too much. There's a couple of details I won't be able to talk about, but I think will be pretty good. So yeah, and the image, it might look a bit boring, but basically I got the idea when I was in the process of reverse engineering a heat pump that we've just had installed with the heating system. I'm trying to hack it to work with Home Assistant, and this gave me the idea. Hack it, just kind of, find another way around it. So that's the long story of how we got to this rather strange session. So this is in the official roadmap. This is Adobe Confidential. We ask you not to take pictures and share it. This is all freely available information, so feel free to take pictures and share it. I'm going to share the deck afterwards. What I've actually done is I've pulled sources together for everything that I talk about. We have changed a little bit the way that we do documentation with commerce, and so you might find that you're missing some things that you could find previously. So I thought it'd be a good thing to pull these references together into the deck so that if you're interested in some of these things, you can go away and look them up. A lot of the content now we're putting on Experience League, it's really more documentation, it's tutorials. There's some really good stuff on there. There's even things like a whole kind of project implementation approach that talks about how you as a partner can approach a project with a merchant. So there's some really good resources on there. So I've pulled links into this where possible. Hopefully they'll be useful. But yeah, it's basically, this is just a roundup of freely available information. It's based on the same structure as the roadmap, so you will get a feel for the things that we're doing in the official roadmap. And obviously, if you're a partner, you can reach out to us and we can do an official roadmap and sort of tell you to, give you all the real detail behind it as well. So, like the official roadmap, this is, the overview kind of architecture diagram that we use for commerce. The interesting thing here is that commerce is just one of like 15 products now. And we sit in the middle of our kind of architecture with Experience Manager, with the content management system. For us, that's quite a good fit. Content and commerce tells quite a strong story. We'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing in those areas later on, but essentially one of the interesting things with the Adobe product suite is that, unlike a lot of competitors, we're very front-end focused. We've got a lot of tooling around customer information, customers' journeys, being able to really build very dynamic experiences based on knowledge about the customer, deliver the right content in a headless way to the right channel at the right time for the customer. So there is a good kind of synergy between Adobe and the Magento product, or the Adobe Commerce product as it is now. You'll see in this roadmap that a lot of our roadmap is focused around how to better leverage those relationships. So a lot of our partners are able to, or are already working with other parts of that product suite. So they might be working with AEM as a content management system. And we're starting to build out the links between the products. We're starting to sort of integrate everything a bit more, having shared sign-on. You'll see in the latest versions of Commerce that we've started to actually use the Experience Platform logo rather than the Magento logo. So we've kind of really started to change the branding. And we'll talk a bit more about what we're doing with that as we move through. And the link here is to the overview of basically the Adobe product suite. So if you're interested, you can get a bit more information on the thing. I'll try not to do the Adobe sales pitch today. I'll try to keep it more focused on commerce, but it's there if you want to get more info. And then the next slide in the official deck starts to talk about, changing the world through personalized experiences. I didn't find exactly the same slide available externally, but I did find an article from Tori, who is one of our leads on the commerce product team. And that article is kind of talking about the benefits of personalization within commerce. So again, this is a big thing for us, leveraging the other tools we've got in the Adobe suite to make commerce experiences personalized. And when we talk about personalization with Adobe, we're really talking about leveraging the AI technologies that we've got with Sensei. We're talking about doing personalization across multiple channels, so not just within commerce, but across all of the different channels, and talking about doing it on a much bigger scale, by being able to use the automation to really to make everything personalized. So, all the steps through the buying process. So this is a big thing for us. We really go heavy on the personalization thing. You'll see us talk about it a lot in our various slides. It's interesting as well because from a partner's point of view, you're starting to elevate the conversation purely from the commerce product and on what you do with commerce and the shopping experience to a more broader conversation about how the merchant gets more lifetime value out of that particular customer. So as a partner, it's kind of interesting because it helps us to really elevate what we're doing with the conversation and perhaps to build a better relationship with the merchant. So there's a kind of an aspect there for the partner. And then on the official roadmap, we've still got these 5 pillars. So we've been using the 5 pillars for a few years. You've probably seen them at some of the events that we've done. We've changed them a little bit in the latest roadmap. So this is the old version. I couldn't find a publicly, kind of published version of the new version, but what I can say is that it's very similar. It's around very similar themes. What we've done is kind of refined some of the wording a little bit. So we talk about marketing and personalization. We talk about merchandising rather than intelligent commerce, because we're really sort of focusing in on what we're actually doing with Sensei rather than just kind of giving it this broad AI-based kind of tag. The other interesting thing that we've done in the latest roadmap is the frictionless platform and the extensible and integrated, we've kind of dropped down as being an underlying theme. And we've added in the concept of basically the community-driven aspect of where the commerce platform comes from. So talking about marketplace, talking about the availability of extensions in the marketplace, because we really see that as being important. So that's something that's in the new roadmap. It's never been there before. We've never called it out as being a separate pillar of what the platform does. But I think it does underline the viewpoint from Adobe that we are committed to keeping the PHP monolith available for you to continue working with. Like, that really is a fundamental thing. We really see that as a uniqueness for commerce, the ability for partners to go in, make changes to the core code. That is super, super critical for us. I talk a little bit later on about what we're doing with the SaaS-based services that we're layering on top, but I think it's important to call out that we really see access to the PHP core and the ability to do those deep customizations as being something that's really critical. And as I say, it is a core part of that, the roadmap pillars on that latest roadmap. So then we actually start to jump into the roadmap. So again, like, I've pulled together slides that are from publicly accessible content, and I've got links here that kind of do a bit more of a deep dive. One of the first slides that we show in the official roadmap is talking about basically the various storefronts that you can use with commerce. And so the slide's mainly around PWA Studio. Obviously, PWA Studio is a public project, so the roadmap for PWA Studio is published on the GitHub. You can see what's being worked on. You can see the various versions that have been released. But we also talk about AEM. We also talk about basically being able to leverage AEM with commerce. AEM is obviously the Adobe content management platform. It does quite a bit more than Page Builder in terms of it's got workflows. You can do automatic language translations. There's kind of a lot more stuff in AEM than there is in Page Builder. So it's another option. It's another way of actually working with the commerce platform. We also still mentioned Luma. Some of the things that we're working on, we're still actually putting capabilities into Luma and developing it. It's obviously not a focus as it's been in the past, but really the focus for us is on headless. So we talk about PWA Studio, we talk about AEM, we talk about the various things that we're doing, but the focus is on headless. So for us, whatever front end storefront you want to use with the commerce backend, that is totally fine. We're seeing fantastic adoption for Hoover. I think they've just passed 1,000 implementations. It was a great kind of milestone for them. There is other storefronts that have been created. We've got partners that have, some that have taken PWA Studio, built on top of it, added their own capabilities, and now kind of packaged that up and branding it. We've also got partners who've kind of built their own storefront from scratch. So, based on their own technology stack that they prefer working with. I think Storefront X is a good example of that. It's another partner-built storefront that you can use with commerce and with other platforms as well. So there's a lot of variety there. We don't mind what you as a partner use. It's whatever's best for the merchant. It's whatever you're most comfortable working with. For us, the focus is on headless. The focus is on sort of, making the best option for the merchant. So there's a couple of links there to what we're doing with PWA Studio, and there is a bit more information there about how you can kind of build on top of that as well. And then the next thing is like quite a big thing for us as well. We've started to do some sessions this morning with partners to talk about this, and we're going to be running some initiatives to help partners to sell it. But essentially what we're doing is we're linking commerce with our experience platform. If you think back to that first slide, a lot of those 15 products are actually linked into a core platform. It's kind of like a data lake for customer information. So what we're basically doing is we've created an extension which is available in the marketplace. You can install it into Commerce, and it starts to push user behavior data, excuse me, into the experience platform. And this kind of opens up a few capabilities. The first thing is, one of the things that Experience Platform has got is a real-time customer data platform. So it's basically a single source of truth for your customer information. And the integration into Commerce captures events that happen within Commerce, like placing an order, browsing a product, adding a product to a basket, and helps you to build up a profile on that customer. So you can then use that with other applications within the Experience platform to create targeted email campaigns, for example, that you then push back to the customer. Or you can do something like, if the user has a beacon on the phone, you can perhaps see when the user goes into a store and then trigger some information based on it. So things that you maybe could build on top of Commerce, but you'd probably be pushing the bounds of the performance at some point. This is a separate platform, separate source of truth for that customer data, and allows you to run these kind of multi-channel multi-channel campaigns in real time. So it's pretty cool. Later on, we'll start to bring that data back into Commerce as well, so you can actually use the segmentation and some of the other more advanced features. So this is quite a big part of the roadmap for us around this kind of theme of marketing and personalization. We also, like, a common thing that you'll see is that, a while ago we made the statement that all new capabilities we will be building as services and making those services available to Commerce. And this is kind of what we've done. Like, a lot of the services that we've released recently, they're basically in the marketplace. If you want to make use of them, you can install an extension and then make use of the capability. So we did that first with product recommendations. I think that was back in June 2020, I think it was. A little bit later on, sometime in 2021, we released Live Search, which is obviously an additional SaaS-based service that powers the search results. We've also got payment services, which is available in the US. We've not brought that to Europe yet. That's actually available to open source customers as well, because they can actually make use of that to leverage payment information. So we've got that available. And then a whole bunch of other stuff. The Experience Platform Connect is the latest one that we've just released. So this is kind of part of that trend that we spoke about for a while, that yes, we're building more SaaS services. The logic for this is that we bring some of the complexity out of the core, so that you only install these things if you want to use them. So it should make upgrades and updates a little bit more easy. It's obviously something that is sometimes used as a criticism, that it can be difficult to do upgrades. So this should make life easier for us as partners, but also for the merchant wanting to upgrade. And obviously, by delivering some of these capabilities as a SaaS service, it also means we take some of the load off the core PHP monolith. So we should get some performance improvements as well. So the kind of good reasons for doing that we think make a lot of sense. Next, one of the things that we've just released in 2.4.5, it actually, I think, can be used with 2.4.4 as well, but we released it at the same time as 2.4.5, is a new catalog service. So this is something that there's a couple of iterations. There's going to be a couple of different releases that will happen. The first one that is available now is basically a catalog service. So it's a GraphQL endpoint. And you could probably think of it as being a cache for catalog data. So it's an API that gives you very fast responses via GraphQL on product catalog information. The idea is that, again, rather than hitting the Commerce backend to make those queries for catalog data, this provides much faster response time for the API. So it should allow you to build much more performance storefronts. And this is stage one. In a later stage, we're hoping that we will actually give the ability to update product information using this API as well. So at the moment, you still put the information directly into Commerce. This then gets synchronized up to the catalog service and you can make your queries against it. In the future, you'll see us start to actually build that out within Commerce. So we actually have the ability to basically to get away from the problems around indexing, which is it's one of those things that quite often, if you say indexing to a Magento developer, they'll kind of like twitch in pain or kind of like recoil in horror because it's been something that has typically been a bit painful. So hopefully we'll remove some of those limitations. And we've some of the official roadmap slides, we use words like unlimited. We use words like unlimited price books and unlimited catalogs, unlimited eSKUs. Those are obviously really quite lofty performance goals. But that's the idea, is to really take that performance to another level, because some of those use cases around B2B, for example, having lots and lots of price books can be a challenge for merchants, and that's something that we want to remove and make it so that performance and scaling is just kind of a non-issue, not a question at all. And then again, product recommendations, like there's a whole section on Experience League about product recommendations and what it does. It's a SaaS service. You install an extension. The Commerce customer is then able to configure some different product recommendations to drop into different pages, and it gives targeted product recommendations back to the customer. This has been really successful. There is around, I think it's above 400 merchants now that are using it. The statistics that we've seen from the merchants that are using it show that they're getting an uplift on the average order value. They're making good recommendations, and this is kind of like the first phase of that personalization. This was obviously released a while ago now, so it's kind of the first level of that. We're using data here that's across different browsers of the site, different customers, and then we're making recommendations based on that. It's not down to an individual level at this point, but obviously you can see where we're heading with the roadmap. What we're doing with real-time CDP is starting to actually bring that AI to actually be able to do analysis of an individual customer based on an individual profile. So you can see the start of where we're kind of going with this technology. So this is a SaaS-based service. You layer it on top of Commerce, you install the extension, and kind of very quick time to value. And obviously, once it's installed, you don't have to maintain it. So there's been hundreds of releases of the service that drives product recommendations and live search. The merchant doesn't have to do an upgrade. They see that completely seamlessly. They just get new capability. So again, this is a really nice way of us being able to combat, pure SaaS providers in the sales process and talk about how we're actually making Commerce much easier to maintain, much faster iterations, been able to take advantage of new features without doing upgrades. Also, live search. This was the second of those services that we released, basically giving you a very fast search capability. That's kind of stage one. There'll be more to come with this. We've got kind of the ability to boost and bury products. We can do some faceted search results. In the future, you'll be seeing again that we'll actually use this on a much deeper level within Commerce. So again, if we've got individual information about a customer and we can associate them to a profile, we can start to actually change the way that we show products within the product listing page and actually really give very, very hyper relevant results to an individual customer. So again, this is a kind of a foundation. We'll continue to develop that and add new capabilities into it. The link that I put here as well is a technical deep dive that talks about the architecture of how live search works, which I think is just quite interesting because it does actually use Elasticsearch at the back end for a data store. There's a whole pipeline there about how we actually take that data, process it, store it, and then use it as a search tool. So it's quite interesting from a tech point of view about how we've done it. And generally, this approach is something that we at Adobe are advocating. We're really hoping that partners will adopt, working with the Commerce platform, rather than do changes within the PHP core, if possible, to build them outside as an API and kind of merge it together, because we see that as being a much lighter weight way of building customizations on top of Commerce and something that it's obviously going to make it easier for a customer, for a merchant, to actually do upgrades in the future, and hopefully make it easier for you to work with the platform as well. Which brings me nicely onto the extensible theme, which is basically the same thing. This is one of the things that we've been talking about for a while now. I think we did a session at Summit. It'll be 2 years ago now, I guess. It'll be back in 2020, it would have been. And we started to talk about what we're doing with Adobe I/O. We've kind of renamed Adobe I/O to App Builder. And this incorporates a few things. It is a whole approach and a set of tools that we hope that partners will adopt to build extensions on top of commerce in a way that's much easier to do. It also gives you the ability to add customizations to the things that we're delivering as a service. So, for example, product recommendations and live search, it's a SaaS service that we deliver into commerce. It's difficult for you as a partner to update that. You don't have access to the code base. So what we've done is built out a set of tools that do allow you to do that. And that is basically AI, the API mesh. So essentially what you do is you can take the results from live search, you can use the API mesh to mesh it together with another API, one that you've built or one that you've got available, and to add extra data into those search results. So basically you could take the responses from live search, you could pull some data from another customer API, perhaps to get some unique pricing or some kind of other information that's not in the core API, add that data into the results, and then you just have to update the component back in the PWA or back in the storefront to take advantage of that extra data. So this is the way that we see that partners will be able to build on top of the SaaS services that Adobe deliver in a way that is a bit easier to work with, and obviously still allows us to, we're still providing live search, and we're still providing all the scaling and the maintenance of that service. So it should be a bit easier to work with. And there's a few elements to it. The resources that I've put here go into a lot more detail on it, but essentially there is a serverless runtime where you can write code in Node.js. You can drop it into the Adobe infrastructure, and that allows you to just host it within Adobe. There is also the kind of eventing framework. So essentially things that happen in commerce, we will drop those as events into a framework that you can then take that event and do something with it. So it could be building an integration into an ERP or a warehouse management system. It gives you a way of actually writing that code, deploying it in the Adobe Cloud, and you don't have to do any extra hosting on top of the commerce instance. There's also a tool there as well that lets you basically the Spectrum React component library, which is a set of standard components that help you build interfaces that feel like a native Adobe app. So again, just giving you tools to be able to extend on top of the platform. And again, like this is kind of one of the things that's been discussed in the past. There was a bit of a worry that we would be moving things to SaaS services and it'd be difficult for partners to customize. This is our approach to making sure that you can still customize on the SaaS services, but we get the benefit of them being SaaS in that we can do rapid iteration, makes them easier to update. So hopefully it's a good kind of solid approach. And then next, we've got a whole bunch of things that are around basically scaling the cloud platform, because that cloud platform that we have today is not going anywhere. You're always going to be able to log in, make changes to the PHP code, and do whatever you need to do those kind of deep customizations that you can't build on top or build via an API. So that's going to stay around. We've been working to make the cloud platform more scalable. So we got some big improvements to the performance with PHP version 8. Obviously, that kind of jumped the performance up a lot. There was a lot of changes we made in 2.4.4 that kind of improved some performance metrics. 2.4.5 as well, you'll see in the release notes that, again, like we've made some steps forward, and I think some of the eSKU limitations have been removed. We've started to raise the bar there, which again is kind of particularly relevant for B2B customers, but it's just kind of iterative kind of progression. This is all kind of part of that process of improving the core code base. We're also still continuing to take that thin core approach. So where we have new capabilities, we will launch them as a SaaS service. will make the core a little bit more lighter weight. We'll be taking some of the processing off the core because we'll be moving it into the services. So, for example, if you're using live search, then you don't have to have Elasticsearch within the commerce container within the commerce environment. So we're getting some performance benefits by doing that. We're making it a little bit easier to maintain it because it's the live search instance is being maintained by Adobe. So those are hopefully going to give us some benefits. From the merchant's point of view, to get more frequent upgrades, we can do releases to product recommendations, live search, catalog service all the time without having to do an upgrade of the core code. So as part of that, what we've also done is we've started to distribute patches. So rather than do as many releases each year, one of the things that the community told us is that they wanted less releases and wanted them to be aligned with the PHP releases. So we've done that. We now distribute patches, and a commerce customer can actually log in to their SWOT tool and see which patches might be applicable to their environment. So it makes it a little bit easier for them to administer the patches. We also built the upgrade compatibility tool, which is a tool that you can run against an existing implementation, and it tries to identify any areas where things might break as you move between versions. So basically giving the merchant and you guys, the partners, to actually a tool to actually make that process a little bit easier, at least identify some of the things that might break during version upgrades and make it a bit easier to do. And then lastly, well, I should say about the actual SWOT tool itself. So the SWOT tool is basically a tool that you can install into the customer's commerce instance, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, and it gathers data about the configuration of that instance and will give you a report that highlights any configurations perhaps that could be tweaked and maybe not best practice. Gives you some statistics about the versions, the extensions that are installed. So again, just making it a little bit easier to work with the PHP monolith, to work with the cloud instance, and make it easier to sort of maintain it on behalf of the customer. And the link that I put there is, there's a whole bunch of documentation that we've started to move onto the Experience League, and this is an implementation playbook that kind of runs through some of these steps, talks about some of the best practice of deploying commerce. It refers to these tools, gives you links to get more information about each of them. So this is quite a good thing that might be useful for a partner, just to kind of understand more about what we consider the best practice to be for a particular customer implementation. And then lastly, I'm going to kind of give you a link to something that we do that is, this is available to everyone. So whether you're a commerce, an official partner, or whether you're working with the open source products, or whether you're a merchant, or whether you're not yet a customer, you're not yet using commerce, this is a program that you can get involved in that basically gives you some access to the product team. It gives you access to some of the betas and some of the pre-release stuff that we're doing. And it's an opportunity to give feedback to the product team on things that have not been released. It could be that, you've got a particular merchant that something we're working on is of interest. We're running a lot of betas at the moment. Things like the catalog service have been in beta for a while. Obviously, we did quite an extended beta with the 2.4 release. We've got a few other betas on for some of the newer things that we're doing with cloud at the moment as well. So this is a good thing to get involved in. It gives you a little bit of a sneak peek access to what we're doing with the product, and you don't have to be a customer or a partner to do this as well. So I definitely encourage you to get involved in that and get more information. And that's it. I'll jump to the chat and see if there's any questions, because I've not been able to sort of see that as I've been going along. But that was a bit of a weird and unusual roadmap, because it was most of the same content, but only using things that are kind of publicly out there. And obviously, feel free to reach out to us and we can run one of these sessions. Obviously, it's under an NDA, so it is for official partners. But hopefully, you'll get a good feel for what we're doing with commerce. we're quite open about what we're doing. A lot of it is published and it's out there. It can be a little bit difficult to navigate some of that content, which is why I thought it'd be fun just to pull it together into a deck and give you some of those links so you can go and read a bit more about it. I know some of these things are not going to be something that you might be able to leverage if you're concentrating on open source, but hopefully it's good to know what we're doing with the commerce product and to sort of think about ways that you can align with that. I think building on top of capabilities using APIs, certainly, it's more relevant if you're working with PWA and with the storefront. So hopefully this has been of value. I'll try and jump in to see if there's any questions. No questions. Everyone's shy.
Oh, John, first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation and the insights you gave us. I heard one term lately from Adobe, and this is MAH, microservice, API first, cloud and headless. And I think this is one of the major themes we will hear a lot of. And honestly, what you showed us today, especially with the catalog, reminded me a lot of the things we did back in 2019 together with Vue Storefront. So we have been an integrator for Vue Storefront, and Vue Storefront had one component called Vue Storefront API. It consisted of a lightweight API framework built on Vue. Together with an Elasticsearch, where we put the Magento catalog actually on the edge in an Elasticsearch container and used it for catalog browsing, search, faceting, and everything which was related with the catalog. So pretty similar what you showed us today. But where we are, as a Magento user, falling short in this architecture is really the component of the PWA Studio. So I think one of the major things which keep us as an integrator from jumping on this Mach wagon is really the availability of the PWA Studio. And I don't even think it's just a PWA Studio, it's also the marketplace. So every theme, every module you want to install, which is customer facing, client facing, has to be compatible with the PWA Studio. And the major pain points, especially, are in the checkout at the moment, the availability of payment service module, for instance. So this is a major topic for us adopting a headless or delivering a headless experience to users. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the plans in regards to the PWA Studio and the migration of the marketplace and migrating all this vast number of modules which are available basically only for the Luma theme.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. That's something that partners raise with us a lot. I think one of the challenges from our perspective is that a lot of those payment service providers, the front end piece generally is their SDK, it's generally their code. So it's not so much something that we as Adobe are able to build out, because it's the payment service provider themselves that we need to provide compatibility. So I think we're starting to see more SDKs available so that you've got a starting point to be able to sort of build the components and implement that service provider. But it is a bit of a challenge. I mean, I think that's a general thing with PWA as well. It's moving very, very quickly. Arguably, with PWA Studio, we started work on it a few years ago. We decided on a tech stack at that point, and things have changed drastically in that time. It's very, very difficult for us to keep on top of it. What we're really seeing with partners is that partners are making their own choices about the tech stack that they want to use to build a PWA site. So PWA Studio is there with, it's open source, so you can go and you can extend it and you can make merge requests. But a lot of partners have gone different ways. They've chosen to use other front ends. They've chosen to take PWA Studio and build on top of it, or they've chosen to just use a completely different tech stack and kind of build out their own storefront. Payments, I think, will continue to be a challenge. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was the payment service that we've launched in the US. That's an interesting thing because we've built a payment service that allows a merchant to set up a payment service provider very, very quickly. So it's kind of, it lets them get themselves onboarded, they can sign up online and get it up and running. But it still doesn't provide a solution for the front end because that still kind of relies on the payment service provider to provide it. So I don't honestly know what the answer is to that. I think that we'll have to hope that we see more of the payment service providers providing components that we can use and that you can sort of leverage within the PWA. The Mac Alliance as well is interesting because we're not part of the Mac Alliance. We could not be part of the Mac Alliance because we're not a full SaaS solution, because we're obviously platform as a service, not SaaS, software as a service. So we can't be part of the Mac Alliance. I think we're very aligned with it though. Like a lot of what we're doing is around composable commerce. It's around building services that you can take and extend and kind of make the best of. What we're doing with App Builder is really trying to provide a set of tools and a deployment infrastructure that will allow you to build things that potentially could be in a marketplace in the future. So it could be that we start to see extension providers building things using App Builder and making that app available in a marketplace for App Builder built apps. That's something that we've spoke about internally. There isn't a kind of a plan or a timeline for that. It's still something that's really being built out, and we're still building the technology for App Builder. It's still kind of in a beta phase, something that we're encouraging partners to get involved in and to test out. But it's got a long way to go. We're still developing it, so I'm sure there'll be lots of things that we need to work on with that. But this is definitely what we see as being a good response to the kind of the Mac Alliance. One of the interesting things as well is that with the Mac Alliance, it's really about having composable commerce, lots of different services that you can pull together in new ways. But when you look at something like a Kenio, Kenio the PIM that is very common with commerce customers, our sort of integration into Kenio is really deep. It's a really good integration. There's a lot of capability there. If you were going a completely Mac Alliance route, you would have to build out a lot more of that integration into the tools within the Mac Alliance. So I think Adobe and Adobe Commerce has got quite a strong story to tell around composable, but you probably won't hear us using the Mac Alliance words because we're just not part of it. It's just not something that we could be a member of at the moment.
Thank you very much. More questions. No? Then maybe I will add another question. Is there already an idea how to package a module which has a Magento component, let's say configuration and server-side API integration, and a PWA Studio component, which has to be written in React? So one piece has to be written in PHP, another piece has to be written in React. How to package that, how to ship that? Is there already a clear view on that, how it will look like for a PWA frontend?
Good question. I think you're stretching the bounds of my technical knowledge. I don't think we have got an answer for that at the moment. No, I don't think we've got an answer though. One of the questions that comes up a lot with partners is about that whole development workflow. I think we've still got it's still a bit of a change of thought process in that the whole storefront is really a separate project, and how do you then deploy that in Commerce Cloud? Do you put it in the same GitHub? Do you use a separate repository? We've got some best practice. I think it's probably on Experience League. There's some best practice. I'll try and find the links and share them afterwards. But yeah, I don't think there's a great answer for that at the moment, to be honest. And to be fair, it's probably stretching my technical knowledge a little bit, so I won't try to answer that one. I'll bow out gracefully.
All right.
Maybe one very practical question. As we've seen on the upcoming releases page during the last days, because it was, I think, frequently visited due to the patch, when will we see the updated roadmap for 2023 and 246 and whatever is planned?
Good question. I don't know. I'm hoping it will be soon. We are, I think, It's going to look very similar though. The dates will be very similar. The structure will be very similar. You will see the same thing, that there'll be the same number of releases. We'll continue to do those feature releases in the background where it's a SaaS service. So the dates will be pretty similar. I think that we're probably still finalising the dates. That's why we've not actually published them yet. But yeah, the release page will be updated as soon as we've got something that we can confirm.
It will be the quarterly releases again, of course.
Exactly the same format as what I've been told.
In terms of patch releases and so on, but we can plan also for upgrades. Yeah, and aligning with PHP is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, there will be patches released that will be, in between the year, so you'll be able to deploy individual patches and fixes using the tool as well. So we will definitely move to that approach. But yeah, the structure will be the same. I know there was a meeting recently where we were kind of finalising some of the product roadmap stuff. So I'm guessing that it'll probably be fairly soon that we do actually update it. But it should be the same structure. We've had it confirmed it's going to be the same structure, the same sort of cycle. It's just the dates that will be obviously confirmed.
Then John, thank you very much for your time today and the presentation. You can still stay in the chat and listen to Matthias and Andreas, who have also interesting talks. Thanks again for your time and hope to see you soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time for my quite unusual roadmap, and hopefully I'll get to one in person in the future and be able to be there in the room with you all.